everybody. Thanks for coming to the official New York book signing event for Derek Shulman's Giant Steps, my improbable journey from stage lights to executive heights. I'm the co-author and journalist Jon Wiederhorn, and it was absolutely my pleasure to work with Derek for several years to help tell his incredible and, yes, improbable story. What I love most about Derek's book, really, is that it defies the conventions of your traditional rock biography while containing so many of the elements that make music bios so fascinating. Yeah, there are groupies in the story because it was the 60s, but Derek was never a drinker, didn't smoke, and never willingly took drugs. His story is about defying the norm. In short, he started in an impoverished lower-class family in a small English town where his school teachers told him that he could never be a rock star. Then, he formed Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, a soulful pop band that featured his brothers Ray and Phil, and they landed a deal with Parlophone Records and recorded at Abbey Road Studios and met the Beatles, George Martin, and all the legends who passed through the place. Simon Dupree became popular, then scored mainstream notoriety with their psychedelic hit single, Kites. That went on to become a big hit, and they performed it on Top of the Pops, which is sort of the English equivalent of SNL, maybe, but bigger. Soul Train, I don't know what they, Don Kirshner's rock concert. There you go. Then, as the 60s faded and the 70s dawned, Simon Dupree broke up, and the three Shulman brothers formed the experimental progressive rock band Gentle Giant, which shunned all the corporate consumerist tropes that seemed to define Simon Dupree. Nonetheless, the band became one of the most popular groups in the genre and released 11 studio albums, several live albums, and toured the world many times. Then, in 1980, having accomplished everything they set out to do, they abruptly broke up and never played another show, despite many huge offers. That's when Derek began the next phase of his career. Having managed Gentle Giant for a while, he brought what he had learned from working in the music industry and got a job at Polygram Records. It was a strange move from someone who had shunned corporate rock, but Derek never strived to be predictable and always followed his own creative muse. He quickly rose through the ranks of the record industry at Polygram, signing Bon Jovi, Cinderella, Kingdom Come, and others. He rose to vice president of the company and then left to spearhead the resurrected ATCO Records, where he worked as president and signed Pantera and Dream Theater and orchestrated the career comebacks of AC/DC and Bad Company, among other accomplishments. There, he had his first real toe dip in the world of rap music as well, and worked for a short time with Dr. Dre and Ruthless Records. That's in the book, and it's precious. Years later, Derek would come to be far more acquainted with the hip-hop world when many artists started sampling Gentle Giant to use in their songs, including, perhaps most famously, Travis Scott with his recent hit single, Hyena. Derek also worked as the head of Roadrunner Records and played a crucial role in the signing and development of Fear Factory, Slipknot, Nickelback, and others, and went on to have other consultant and staff jobs at different labels. There's so much more to talk about, and it's all in the book. And there's stories about self-belief, devotion to family, car and motorcycle accidents, inner band turmoil, and the misogynist, drug-fueled environment of the power-hungry music business. There are memorable stories about the Beatles, Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, Elton John, Status Quo, Sherman Hemsley, yes, Jethro Tull, Ahmet Ertegun, Insane Clown Posse, Questlove. I could go on, but just read the book and you'll be glad you did. Okay, I feel like I've already given a good plug to Derek and introduced him by default. So I'd like to introduce another legend who needs no introduction. This is Tony Visconti. Tony, of course, was the first producer to work with Gentle Giant and helped guide the band through two of their most important albums. Over the decades, Tony brought his experience as a singer and musician to his countless production projects, which included more than 10 records with David Bowie, some of his biggest, and albums by T-Rex, Thin Lizzy, Badfinger, Alejandro Escovedo, and many, many more. And now on to the book. I will be reading a section of Giant Steps, which is written in the first person. in Derek's voice. So just pretend I have a British accent, am a little soft-spoken, and an accomplished rock star and music executive, which is pretty much what most rock writers want to be anyhow. So without further ado, this is Chapter 8, A Tall Tale, in which Derek first meets Tony Visconti. I haven't memorized it, so. Jerry Braun introduced us to Tony Visconti, a transplanted American producer who was developing a solid reputation. He heard the first Gentle Giant demos we made and said, "Yes, please." Tony was the ideal producer for us. It was 1970, and he had worked with T-Rex, Badfinger, Straubs, and David Bowie. We were lucky he made the time to fit us into his schedule. Right after he finished a T-Rex album, we met him at Trident Studios in London, and then recorded a series of 3-hour sessions. He slid us in between other sessions with David Bowie and T-Rex. We had to be productive in the hours we had, but we never felt like he was rushing us or was thinking about other projects while he was working with us. Being with Tony was incredible. There was electricity in the air. We were making history. We had worked with great producers like George Martin and Dave Paramore, but Tony was far better for us at this stage in our career. As a gifted musician as well as producer, he was a great mentor. He was knowledgeable about classical, jazz, folk, rock, and pop, all the elements we applied to our songs. And he understood our objectives, even when we weren't entirely sure what we were doing. That led us to our path of sonic freedom. We weren't at the end of the road by any means, but Tony helped us realize that our only limitations were self-imposed, and that we had the talent and creativity to break barriers. We did a bit of pre-production with Tony first, but we were so excited about the songs and had spent so much time rehearsing them that they were mostly good to go. We put everything we had into that album. All of our technical skills, off-the-wall arrangements, and vocal techniques. In that respect, it was the opposite of Simon Dupree and the Big Sound. More specifically, it was nothing anyone had ever heard before. It was strange, but deliberately so. There was no lack of compositional skill in those songs, and if we occasionally missed the mark, it wasn't because we were shooting in the dark. Carrie and Ray wrote their parts on sheet music. Nothing was jammed or thrown together. At the same time, in the beginning, we were stumbling around and finding our footing. We were still in our gestation period compared to what we would do together over the decade, but it was a great start. We worked hard with Tony, and we loved it. We also enjoyed the downtime, during which we became good friends with the guys in Bowie's band, including guitarist Mick Ronson and drummer Mick Woodsmansey, who worked on Bowie's albums The Man Who Sold the World. Tony joined us in the pub after the sessions and made sure we all felt comfortable with one another. He was all about creating camaraderie between his friends, so he initiated conversations that helped break the ice. Bowie dropped in several times to say hi. But he'd disappear soon after, like a spaceman beaming back to his ship. He didn't have a big ego and wasn't aloof or standoffish. He was shy back then and seemed uncomfortable in social situations. When he was around us, we exchanged niceties, but he didn't say much. I think he put all of his personal expression into his music, and at that time lacked a lot of the communication skills that he'd so capably mastered down the road. When we were in the final stages of recording Gentle Giant, Tony took some time off to work with T-Rex. All we had left to do was overdubs, so Tony suggested we drop in and watch T-Rex record in the studio. In a way, it was more like a freak show than a learning experience. Or maybe we learned what we didn't want to do when we went back in the studio. Mark Bolan was finishing his guitar overdubs. And we hung behind the studio glass and watched. As the tape rolled and the gritty, glammy music blared from the speakers, Mark made agonized faces as he played double stops on his Les Paul. 1 second he was on his feet, the next he dropped to his back, kicking the air like he was trying to ward off wild animals, all the while continuing to manhandle a barbed blues lead from his guitar. There was no audience there, but Mark was determined to go wherever the music took him. After Mark left and we headed back into the studio, I spoke to Tony. "What the hell was that about?" I asked. "What was going on with Mark?" That's just what he does, Tony replied. It works for him. If something works, remember what you did and don't be afraid to do it again. It was good advice. Well, but what Mark was doing looked a bit iffy to me, like he was trying to impress whoever was watching. That guy's full of shit, Phil said. But of course he wasn't. We toured with T-Rex later, and Mark was as uninhibited on stage as he had been in the studio, kicking up dirt and rolling around as though his playing was a bit primitive for my tastes. There was no question he was rocking up a cyclone. Tony had the musical knowledge and engineering skills to enhance the songs of any of the artists he worked with, whether they were basic bar bands or sonic extremists. He enjoyed putting his touch on a recording without altering the core essence of the music, and that's what made him such a great producer. In our case, he enjoyed helping us fine-tune our songs. With our blessings, he turned a knob here and tweaked a fader there to bring out the best in our performances. His passion for the project was contagious, and as a kicker, he wrote the liner notes for the album. As it turned out, he was also a damn good creative writer. We loved Tony's liner notes, and were astonished that, as busy as he was, he'd taken the time to write them just to help us out. I still love thinking about all the people who bought the album and read Tony's fantastic tale while listening to our eclectic band of rock, jazz, classical, and folk, and then examining the gatefold cover, which depicted the head of a smiling giant on the front, and the back, which showed the giant holding the six of us in his outstretched palms. That came from Tony as well. I want to introduce you to a guy named George Underwood, Tony said to us one day. He's David Bowie's best friend from school, and he's a brilliant artist. I think you guys will hit it off. Tony had been right about everything so far. So we thought, okay, great, let's meet the guy. We found out that George and Bowie used to play in the band George and the Dragons, but broke up after an argument over a girl. George punched Bowie in the left eye, and since he was wearing a ring, the resulting injury caused Bowie's left pupil to become permanently dilated, accounting for the difference in color between his eyes. The damaged eye could not be repaired, but the friendship quickly mended. George lived in Putney, so when he came in from Portsmouth to meet him, Tony put us up on the floor in his spare room. We didn't know what we were going to do for the album cover, so we hoped George would have some ideas. He suggested we base the artwork on the band's name, since we were a new group with an unusual moniker. He drew a picture of the gentle giant, and we loved it. He suggested that the giant gently cradle the band members in order to create a connection between us and get our images on the album cover without a huge, tacky band photo. It was iconic. It was beautiful. It was Gentle Giant. Gentle Giant has been called one of the first great prog rock albums to follow King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King, which came out in November 1969. It's a flattering comment, but not one with which I'm altogether comfortable. The problem with many so-called prog bands is that instead of making complex passages that fit their multifaceted songs, peaking and dipping in intensity at the right times to provide memorable conflict and resolution, and weaving their compositions together with strong melodies, they want to be musical mathematicians. They make their songs complex because they can, not because they should, and embark on circuitous journeys that never take the listener anywhere, and therefore amount to nothing more than treading water. Some of the greats, and I refuse to name them, have fallen into this trap from time to time, and even we came close at moments before we established a firm foundation. Everyone in Gentle Giant had a low threshold for boredom, and whenever we did something that sounded like something else, or was too repetitious, we got sick of it fast, and either created something else to evolve the part, or threw it away and started over. We hated bands that put an abrupt 3-minute mellotron part in the song, or 5 minutes of classical music passages in an effort to emulate the London Symphony Orchestra. Carey and Ray could compose symphonies if they wanted to, and we could easily smell bullshit when other bands tried and failed. We could have done it well, but that was never going to be our signature. It might seem strange, but we wanted to be the opposite of grandiose. Other bands made double album concept records, but the closest we came to that was on our loosely thematic fourth album, Three Friends, which wasn't about alien civilizations, mythology, topographic oceans, or ancient military conflicts. To us, All that stuff defined pretension. And while naysayers have accused us of being pretentious over the years, I don't think we ever were. I just think they didn't try or care to understand our musical goals, which included writing inspiring, forward-thinking music for people who were tired of having everything spelled out for them, but who enjoyed great sing-along vocals as much as accomplished playing. To that end, I was the vocalist, but Ray, Phil, Gary, and Kerry handled complex harmonies with ease, giving us the Baroque choir element that separated us from many of the bands to whom we were compared. In our unwavering desire to be different from everything else, if that made us pretentious to some, so be it. But it was never a result of being arrogant or feeling superior. We just knew what we could do with the music, and we weren't about to sell ourselves short to be more easily digestible. We didn't want to write or play 3-chord rhythms with a vocal on top, then a middle 8 and a guitar solo. We had already done that. We preferred to think of our pieces as being like cinematic passages that evolved over the course of a song, creating different images for the listener to latch onto. The instrumental passages and vocal sections were parts of the composition and were structured to make the songs coherent. Each of the parts was essential for the songs to develop and evolve. So now, I guess we've heard plenty from Derek because that was straight from his mouth. So my first question is for Tony. Were you familiar with Derek, and had you heard Kites or anything else by Simon Dupree and the Big Sound before you started working together?
I'm going to handhold this little baby. Yes, I heard Kites, and I loved it, and I think it was one of the better pop songs of the day. And it got a lot of airplay on the radio, and I was very much aware of them. I had no idea they were going to become Gentle Giant, however.
Mm-hmm. And what intrigued you about the band when you first heard the Gentle Giant demos?
Oh, the Gentle Giant demo. Well, I heard some music that, had shades of every modern classical music and jazz earmarks. Like Stravinsky could have written some of those Gentle Giant songs. And it was just far out. And I'm a far out kind of guy. I love different stuff. The more out there, the more I love it. And I just had to work with this group. Also, as I was a trained musician, I was in 3 years of music major in high school. And I played in the orchestra, the military band. I played glockenspiel, tuba, double bass, trombone, not French horn, though. That is a weird instrument, French horn. And then I wrote many, many arrangements for my productions, like T-Rex. If you listen to a song called Cosmic Dancer, there's a 5-part string arrangement on that, which I wrote in my flat in London, very cold flat, with my classical guitar. I didn't even own a piano. So I was always drawn towards this music. And eventually I could just write an arrangement. I didn't even have to go to a piano because my head's full of music. And so when I met this band, I said, wow, they are going to stretch me. And I'm going to stretch them as well. I'm going to see how far I could push them. And they tested me, obviously. These guys were fantastically talented musicians, and I had to make the mark too. So I think within our first few days of recording, we got the respect each other wanted from each other, and we proceeded to just make far out sounds, really tighten up the arrangements, and I also recorded with a view of how it was going to be mixed. So I was aware that this needed a special kind of mixing. And I made sure that it was going to fit in that, which, the mixing was like no other mixing. It was a new kind of mixing, a new kind of music. And this is just rejuvenated me. It made me, my interest in music, all very keen again. There's no reason why something has to be categorized. This is rock, this is reggae, this is there's no reason why music can't come together from different sources and create a new type of music. Mm-hmm. Which I guess goes all the way back to Paul Whiteman, who made Rhapsody in Blue and all that stuff. You know, that was the first time a classical orchestra played with a jazz band, things like that. You have to do these things to keep music moving forward and making it interesting, and instead of the same old, same old. So this was this saved my life, you know, saved my sanity to work with these guys.
I mean, clearly, it was a match made in Prague heaven. I mean, it was you both came from the same aesthetic place. But Derek, what was it that made you want to work with Tony, or was that something management set up and that just happened to be, you know, kismet? And what was best for you about the experience?
Well, to be honest, as Tony said, I mean, it was a management decision that we should work with a guy called Tony Visconti. You know, it was our first record deal on Vertigo Records, and we said, okay, you know, sounds good to us. We didn't know who Tony was. But literally the first day or two we got together, we realized that this is someone who could understand what we were looking for, getting away from where Simon Dupree was, and someone who could be, who could push us musically into a direction that we didn't even know existed. Whenever we said, how about trying this? He would say, absolutely, go for it. Be yourself. Do something that you want to do as opposed to what you think is commercial or what you believe that should be done. And I have to say this, that had it not been for Tony producing our first couple of records and putting us in a direction that we finally went into as we progressed as a band, I don't think Gentle Giant would have developed into something that we became. And he really set us off in a place where we didn't think about something that is out there to follow. He said, just do what you are and be I'll use this word, authentic. And that's what we were. And he said, just do and be who you are. At the same time, by the way, Tony also played on our records. I mean, I was looking at the track listing before I came in here, and actually Tony said, what about, you know, a recorder solo, or what about a recorder quartet? And we said, we don't play recorders, we play guitars. And he said, well, I'll do it. You know, so, and he did. I was looking at this album here, and I didn't realize on one of the tracks that you played a bass drum and triangle. You know, so Tony was part of the band. And had it not been for Tony being there at the very beginning, I don't think Gentle Giant would have developed to where we are now, or where it was then.
I'd like to add to what Derek just said, that I am so happy I was their first producer, because it would have been awful if they got some pop guy who, you know, wanted to go back to Simon Dupree, you know. Yeah. And what they did, I said, the world has got to hear this music. They simply have to hear this. This is what's going on here. You didn't sound like King Crimson. You didn't sound like anyone but yourselves. This was a new thing, a brand new thing.
And you encouraged that.
And you were three brothers, which I believe in that. I have worked with brothers before, but not three, only two. So there was something that you guys probably, since you were kids, had in common. You know, music and a method of communicating with each other that you worked at. Maybe you had fist fights. I don't know.
Oh, well, no fist fights, but fights. Certainly
fights. You know, but you had it all worked out. You were half the group. And you were brothers, and that was something that you brought to the table, as they say. And that really, I had to respect that. And get the guys in the band who weren't brothers, you know, they went right along with it. Like the drummer was slamming. He's not a brother, the drummer.
No, Martin. No.
What a slamming brother he was. I mean, drummer he was. You know.
And a brother as well. We were all brothers.
Any band would have had him. You know, what was his name?
Martin Smith.
Martin Smith. Yeah. It's been 60 years, excuse me. But, you know, so you saved my life, really. You know, well, I was getting a bit into the Mark Bolan singles. They were easy to make. David Bowie was a good friend, but he really hadn't discovered his strength yet. and all that. And you just came at a perfect time in my life, and I was there for you too.
Well, as you said, it's kismet. It really was.
Yeah, yeah.
We were very lucky.
We'll be doing a Q&A session at the end, so, but thanks. So it's funny, you sort of predicted my next question. Being that there were three Shulman brothers and that there was certainly unique chemistry between them, do you feel that that had a tremendous, this is for both of you really, a tremendous impact in the intuitiveness of these arrangements and the understanding that went on between the artists? And the second part of that question is, were you ever exposed to any of the cat screeching, drag out fight shenanigans?
No, I never saw them fight in the studio. They went to the men's room or something. But I always saw them just being keen to get it right. They were, and that turned me on how important they were always serious in the studio. I mean, we could crack a joke and break the ice a little bit, but they were always serious about this music. And I had worked with rock bands who were drinking and doing drugs during the sessions, which used to disgust me. But this was what I was trained to do, and I'm very malleable. I can work with a band who uses drugs and and all that stuff, but I don't take them. I just know I know when to call it quits. I mean, I had one band in particular, like when we hit 11 at night, they were gone, but they still wanted to work. Like if they called a cocaine dealer, they could stay up till 4. But I go, no, I won't wait for the cocaine dealer. Thank you, I'm leaving.
Did you spill the beans?
No, I can't say that. Well, they're all dead now,
That's exactly. That's it. No, if you're asking me about our sibling situation, it was always we had a commonality, of course. That was and we were all. Every one of the family was thankfully musical, so. Growing up as a kid, music was always around the house. My father was a professional musician, so, and that was something that is in our DNA. But having three brothers, usually it's a two-brother band, but three brothers was tough. And in fact, my brother Phil, who was 10 years older than I was, we were kind of the front two guys, and to be honest, it was hard for the other members of the band because I was the singer and the front guy, but Phil was the eldest and felt that he should be the leader. So there was a kind of a tension there, but I think that tension created things that actually brought out more creativity in some ways. And we were also very, very lucky. I'll just say this: to find our first member of a new group called Kerry Meniere. And Kerry had a degree in composition from the Royal Academy of Music. And him being part of our team, our brotherly team, was absolutely instrumental in the band becoming Gentle Giant, who are, I hope, revered as a decent prog band, if you like that term. But my brothers and I, Phil and I would clash. I'll be honest. Ray was always a peacemaker, but we always, as Tony said, we always wanted to get things right. We were kind of perfectionists in that way, in that respect, and I think that Tony encouraged that as well.
Mm-hmm. As Derek, as you explained to me during our interviews, you took a far more active role in the production for the second album, Acquiring the Taste. And Tony, that's something that you encouraged Derek to do, right? I mean, as a producer, having that as your role, what did you see in Derek that made you feel that he could really take the reins?
When the band has ideas, I'll never hold them back. I mean, I'm the producer's job is to make them sound great, and if they can give me a clue as to how to make them sound greater, I'm all ears. I'm all open to that. I'm not an egotistical producer. I want to encourage the people I work with, and I want to bring out the best in them. That's my motto,
It was interesting. On the second record, we only had about, I would say, 2/3 of the music written, and we went in and we literally had a metronome going. And again, Tony said, "Look, you guys are really good at what you do. Build your music around that." And in some of those songs or tracks, they were literally built around a metronome, not a click track, a metronome. In those days, I don't know why we didn't have a click track.
I don't think it was easy to get a click track
No,
in
I
those
don't think
days.
so.
No, I mean, that was only film studios had the click
Really?
track. Yeah, and ordinary recording studios didn't. So you brought in a metronome.
Yeah, that's right.
Just going back in time a little bit, Elton John, of course, toured with your first band, Simon Dupree, and at one point wanted to join Gentle Giant. Why didn't that work out? And, you know, did he provide any guidance for the band in any way, even though he didn't become a member?
Well, Elton was Reg at the time, and Reg was he did depth for our regular keyboard player for a little while, and me and Ray in particular got along really well with him, and it was about 67, 68, and he was also an incredible muso, and he really understood and was a fan of every kind of music, and he saw in, I guess, the Shulman brothers a musicality that he had, and he tipped it off, said, "You guys are really good. You should listen to these bands that are happening on the West Coast, like Spirit and Zappa, we knew about." And he said, "Think about what you're doing, because you know at some point you're going to think about doing different things." In 1970 or 69 and 70, we decided that Simon Dupree had its day, and we were going to do something brand new. And in fact, we stayed in touch with Reg, and you know it was Reg, not Elton then. And we said to Reg, you know, we decided to do what you suggested or what we were thinking about, and he said, "I'd like to discuss being your keyboard player." And we said, "Okay, well, fine." Well, me and Ray went up to Watford, which is north of London, and he just met Bernie, and he started playing. We said, "What have you got?" And he started playing songs like Skyline Pigeon and a couple of other things that we don't remember. And we thought, this is great. I mean, it's nice, but not really what we were looking for. And then at the same time, he said, "And just I want to let you know, I'm going to change my name from Reg Dwight to Elton John." And we looked at him and said, "That sounds good." Not really, you know. But so the bottom line is that we went back on the train to Portsmouth where we lived, and we thought about it. So we said, "This is not really for us." So we said, "Reg, you know, you're great, we love you, but it's not going to work out." Thank God for him, because a year later, he was Elton John, and we were still struggling to get gigs as the new Gentle Giant, effectively.
Did you know that, remember on Brewer Street, there was a little record shop where he was the clerk?
Oh,
He used to, I forget the name of it, but I bought records from him so many times before he was Elton John.
Yes, yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then he gets on the telly, and I go, "I bought records from that guy."
That's right. But he was an incredible influence, but also he's a class act, and he still is.
Absolutely. Gentle Giant's second album, which you have sitting there, Acquiring the Taste, is considered a fan favorite. And it's musically experimental and certainly groundbreaking. Interestingly, though, it wasn't really something that your management took to when you first took it to them. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Well, again, this was an album that Tony produced and played on 4 tracks, actually. It was different to the first album. And the first album was kind of us getting to be a band and playing our live set. This was an album of a little more experimental. And again, this gentleman said, "Go for it." So we took it to our manager, Jerry Braun, who actually was a fantastic manager, because he was a patron and allowed the Shulman brothers to become, you know, what we were. We took 6 months, and he paid our salaries. So we took this album to him, and he said, "What am I going to do with this? I can't, you know, this is not going to get anywhere." And he said, "I can't work with a band that plays this kind of music." So we said, "Oh, okay, well, I guess we better find another manager." So this, in fact, is what we did. And you know, so no, he did. He thought, okay, the first album, because he was managing at the time bands like Uriah Heep and other bands that were kind of heavy, but you know, kind of progressive as well. He figured that Gentle Giant would develop in the same way. We went at 180 from there, of course, and so basically he said, I can't do anything with it. So you know what? Go find yourself a manager. In the meantime, I'll take care of you. And we did find another manager. In Worldwide Artists, which is another story you'll read in the book, which is a whole episode in itself. The Black Sabbath we were together with, and ultimately, yes, and that was an interesting period in our existence.
Well, you opened the can of worms there. I mean, it's obvious. Everybody knows that Sabbath were robbed blind by Worldwide Artists. Reading your book, you'll find out, of course, that Gentle Giant too were subjected to some unfair and ridiculous financial situations, which was common, I guess, for a lot of starting bands at the time. It was almost like a rite of passage to get screwed over by your management company.
The royalty structure in those days was horrible. Given that here's the circle, it's 100%. So 10% is given to the production people. The producer's got to take his percentage out of that. And then the band, say if you're a 6-piece band, you got to split your little slice 6 ways. And I don't know, I mean, it's changed a lot nowadays. You get a lot more of the pie. But in those days, it was really hard to get any kind of a royalty. I was on 2% royalty when I was recording T-Rex, even though I discovered them, brought them into the company, made massive hits. My percentage never went above 2%.
Interestingly, Tony would bring that. I having been in the business on the other side of the coin, if you like, I was told that you had a contract with this management company that only allowed you 3%, and I said I would never sign anything like that. I actually looked through my old contracts, and I kept a whole litany of contracts in my study drawer, and I finally was able to find this contract, and sure enough, there's a signature which is mine saying I accept 3%, and I couldn't believe that I signed that damn contract.
You did it.
I know I did. But that, listen, that, as you said, those are the days when you just were happy to play music and enjoy your ability to put it on vinyl or play on the stage.
Gentle Giant's first tour in the United States was with Black Sabbath, who shared your management, which is how that came together. It's a strange pairing, and while on one level it might seem like an amazing opportunity, it was kind of a mixed blessing, wasn't it?
To say the least. The one thing that we learned on that tour was how a band can be so excessive and debauched, if you like. I mean, these guys, they would play one show and do as much as you can, to their bodies, and then 2 or 3 days off, and it was a weird tour because we were, I mean, Gentle Giant and Black Sabbath is almost like having Stravinsky play with I don't know, Aha or whatever. So we went on stage. When we went on stage, for the most part, no one knew us. We were booed immediately. I mean, as soon as we went on, we were booed. But one thing we learned, I'll say this, is that having been in Simon Dupree, we learned stagecraft, and we were able to kind of think about who we were playing to. And at the end of our set, we played the heavier songs. We get a little clap and even a bravo for the most part, except for the very last tour of the show, of the tour in LA, which I think everyone probably knows about. But playing with Sabbath, we love those guys. We had the same management, but it was a trip to see guys self-destruct in certain respects, and it was something we'd never seen before and wanted to stay away from. To be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we could certainly talk about Gentle Giant and the other albums that you did all evening, but I think there's a limit to our time, and there's certainly more to this book than just Gentle Giant. And I think one of the really interesting parts is the way you always followed your own muse and did whatever you wanted to do, however contrary it seemed to be. You went from this very contrary, I guess is the word. The Gentle Giant was not a mainstream band. You kind of subverted from within. You did your own thing. You didn't listen to labels. You forged your own identity. But then you went to work for a label, more than one, and had to follow a certain set of rules and a different protocol. Was that just what the job demanded, or were you trying to subvert from within?
Well, initially it was, I had to get a gig, to be honest with you. And I didn't want to be, honestly, having been on the road for 16 years, I had a family, and I got an offer to work at a record company, Polygram Records. And so I said, okay, let me give it a shot. And I remember the first day I went from office to office. There's a gentleman there who was at the company at that time. And I realized that every office had its own agenda. Every office had their own priority. And I thought, damn, I thought this was a record business, not something that, that we all pulled together. Every office had their priorities and their own whatever they wanted to sell. At the end of the day, I remember calling Sharon, my wife, and saying, I don't want to do this. I'm going to quit tomorrow. You said, don't do that. Stay around. It'll be okay. And I learned that it was a business that it wasn't the music business. It was a business of music. And I learned how and why things worked and why a band became a priority and why it was important, et cetera, et cetera. But the key thing, as far as I was concerned, was that any artist I was involved in, and I sit next to a guy who has similarities, is that no matter what music style they were in, they had to be authentic. They had to be a band that were doing something that was their own and not following a trend or a fashion. And that goes from a band like Bon Jovi, believe it or not, to a band like Pantera, to a band like Dream Theater, all the bands that I've been involved in. And Slipknot, they were bands that were forging their own identity and not following a trend. And that's something that I hope that I continue to all of my life, just to be someone who is real and not follow a trend and be a follower. And I'm sitting next to a guy who has done the very same thing, I think, right?
Yeah, we have to remind record labels and ourselves that our music is culture. It's not a business.
Exactly.
And if you want to make a ton of money, go into some other business. Record labels, and I tell you, I got 2%, and my artist got 4% or something like that. All the rest went to the label. And, they have to have offices at the top of a building. They have to have the penthouse suite and all that. I live in a, Greenwich Village. I don't have very high overheads, But the music business, like the film business, has very high overheads, and I sometimes wonder if they need all this stuff. If they need to have, like, you walk into a CEO's office, and it's like you could fit 50 people in that room. Honestly, I've been in offices like that. You go, why? And you're going to tell me I can't have $5,000 more for my production, and you have all this crap in your office that it's only you like. Obviously, like it's Trump's new office. It's all gold. They think like Trump, these people. So I don't care if he hears that. Can't hurt me.
Nor do I. So yeah.
So I mean, that's what that's the dichotomy in the business. It's a business, but yet it's an art form, and it's our culture. And you and I, we fell in love to these songs. We thought we were the hippest kids on the block because we had the new album and all that. This is culture, and they can't. To turn it into a hardcore business is a sin. You have to give somewhere. I think Derek's got a heart. He treated artists because he was an artist before he became a label guy. And he knows what we all went through to make this music, and he knows because we all started out as fans ourselves. I bought the Beatles records, I bought Buddy Holly records, and you can't forget that.
Right, and that's something that I think I brought to the executive side of the business. There was not a band that could say you don't know what it's like to do this or sleep in a van or not be able to pay a hotel room or whatever. There was nothing a band could tell me that I haven't done as a musician. So I could always be a part of the artist, be a part of the band and be understanding of what whatever they needed to do, because I've done that, and I want, and generally the musicians would relate to me in that fashion. They always would.
Absolutely. I'm sure some of you guys out there probably have questions that you're aching to ask, so I'd like to open it up to the audience. You've been waiting patiently, so please.
I wanted to ask Derek if there was any way you could hear Gentle Giant before Three Friends. Three Friends was like the first American release.
Right.
So that was the first thing I heard, and of course I went out and got imports of the first two records as soon as I heard it, because I was so impressed.
Okay.
Was there any way to hear Gentle Giant over here before Three Friends?
No, for whatever reason, we were deemed uncommercial for the American audience, these two first albums. But of course, once Three Friends was out and it started to do quite well, I can't remember what the record company was. They put these out and they became fairly popular. But no, we were deemed, too experimental for the record label to release at that point. Ultimately, they came out, of course, and believe it or not, the band is able to get the catalog back, and it belongs to the band, which is, something that we're very happy about. So we're able to now, help out and get our music out to the people, including all of the titles that, Tony produced and other people produced. I just want to say something about Tony, but again, one more thing, that I was looking at these various. I said this the other day, of these two albums, the people who are mentioned as engineers and in tape ops, they're all legends. On the first album, Roy Thomas Baker was our tape op, right? And on the second album, Martin Rushton, Chris Thomas. And who was it?
Chris Thomas was the only person in England who understood the Moog synthesizer.
And he programmed it for
And
us.
they bought one for him, and it was like 5 refrigerators on top of each other. And you had to, if you hired the Moog, you had to hire Chris. No one knew what the hell
right.
those knobs did.
And Bill Price.
Bill Price too. Yeah, what a
So
great
he,
engineer.
as well as being a mentor, that's why I'm so glad that Tony's here. As well as being a mentor for Gentle Giant, he was a mentor for amazing producers who went on to huge things.
Advision Studios, was that?
Excuse me?
Advision?
Advision, yeah.
Advision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a real amazing, incredible studio.
It was right in the middle of a fashion district, too, on Bond Street. And you could buy fancy, like, $1 million shoes, or you could make a record.
Yes?
As a retired recording engineer, my first almost accidental exposure was Octopus. I knew nothing of the band. A friend of mine was setting up a record store and said, in lieu of pay, go pick out a record. And I saw the American cover. I said, that looks cool. I wonder what it sounds like. Brought it home, put on the first track, my jaw dropped. And I had to know who the recording engineer was. He was Martin.
Yeah.
The band has always worked with incredible Gary Martin,
Gary, yeah.
Northfield,
Paul, yeah.
Jet Brink, of course. But Martin Rushton, it blew my mind to this day, knowing that you were probably working 16-track
Yeah.
at Advision,
Yep.
which I visited by.
Oh, really? Okay.
Day. Applied for a job, still have my rejection letter.
First track box.
No.
That done it on nerves.
But to this day, I can't figure out how how do you even make a record work? I mean, obviously the musicians are otherworldly.
Well, no, Martin certainly was an incredible personality. Actually, he was and very, he was. I mean, he kind of co-produced that album with us, and in fact, he was. Obviously, he became very well known in his own right. As I said, he's on this record. But yeah, Martin was a great person to have in the studio, and is a little story that he was a fun guy as well. He was really someone who knew how to break attention. And in fact, there's a story in the book about we would be in the studio and trying to think what are we going to do next. And there's something called the Trogs tape. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Trogs tape. It's
Anyone who worked in a recording studio in the 70s knows the Trogs.
Okay, well, if you know what the Trogs tape is, then we had the tape. We had a 2-track running, about 8 reels of tape around the studio, quietly. And it was going 24/7. Well, or as much as we were in the studio. And when we were scratching our heads saying, "What are we going to do?" Martin would turn down the faders and he just stick up the fader of the Trogs, saying, "It's a fucking number one. It is. I gotta make it. You gotta hear it. I can't."
You can download this now, but then it was really hard to get back in the day.
But back in the day, everyone knew about
But
it.
you have to listen to the Trogs tape because it's the breakdown of the band, the mental breakdown of the band.
It's one of them. It's one of the most held. Every musician that is in the studio knows about the Trogs tape, and when you heard it, he turned up the fader, and that would break the tension, and we just crack up and let's go to the pub and come back, and then we start again. But that's what Martin would do. He was as a fantastic co-engineer / producer.
Great. Any other questions? Yes?
The Trogs tape could be sort of a counterpoint to Heady Bale Parking Lot, or what Phillips did during the boat. Going back to General Giant back in the 70s and progressive rock, did you and the band have much experience doing festivals? You would think a band like General Giant would be part of a package with the Floyd or Yes or other of those like progressive bands playing all those British festivals back in the 70s. Is that something that you did?
We did several festivals. Actually, we did a tour with Yes, actually, and they were enormous at that point, and we were just getting up there as far as popularity is concerned. And I remember that the fact that we were doing quite well. I mean, after our sets, we'd get an encore, maybe even 2, and the next gig, it seemed like we had less room on the stage. It was maybe a half an inch, 6 inches less. At the end of the tour, I think the stage was about that size, and the lights were maybe that spotlight, and that was it. So yes, we had experiences of having had a festival, and but generally we didn't play that many big shows, but that was one I remember that was I remember that it was a little iffy for being on the stage with that guys are there.
Did you record live albums and put them out?
We did one. Yeah,
One.
one.
Which one was that?
Playing the Fool.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah, we
never, I
just
never
put it
heard
out.
it. I never heard it.
Oh, I should have. We'll get together.
Send a box to my house.
Yeah, that was a 4.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
They
we
could
just-
play. They could really play.
Yeah, that's one thing we could play. One thing we could do is play our instruments. We were good at that.
Green's still around?
Yeah, Gary's he lives near Chicago. Yeah, thankfully we're all. And the good thing about the band, I'm talking about the band as opposed to the other bands that I deal with, is that when we stopped, it wasn't acrimonious at all. We said, let's stop, and we're still great friends. I was in touch with Kerry today, in fact. And he told him to say hello to Tony. So yeah, we're friends and we're in touch all the time, which is great.
Yes, in the back.
All right, thanks. Thank you guys so much for everything. All of you, changed our lives with the music. And I just want to, guys like me, I was born in '76, so obviously never got a chance to see the band. I saw Gary and Malcolm when they did the Street Friends thing, which was as close as I'll ever get to seeing the band. It was amazing. And I just wondered why you never felt the urge to make more music with those guys or do another show or...
It was, when we stopped playing the band, when we stopped in 1980, I think we were creatively out of gas, to be honest with you. And what we didn't want to be or do was to continue and become a parody of ourselves. You know, it was something that all of us felt that, you know, we had to create something new and be really great at it. And what we didn't want to feel like was we had to go back and put, you know, pants on that were size 40 instead of 32, you know, and do the old stuff when we're getting older ourselves. So that's something that it was important to us, that we weren't continuing to be a job. And that's something that I will say personally, is that when music becomes a job or feels like a job that you're clocking in and clocking out, that's when to stop. And that's kind of what it felt like towards the end of it. You know, Civilian didn't work, you know, and we realized that had we continued, maybe the value of the band would go down. So let's stop while we're ahead and let's move on to different things. And that chapter of those 10 years is an incredible chapter. I look back on and think, damn, this is, you know, I'm really lucky to be part of this amazing group and to be, you know, and to play music that I still look back and love, including the bands I was involved in that, you know, on the other side of the fence.
Yes.
Just a quick question for Derek and for Tony. Derek, you said you had a bad experience with Black Sabbath. Were there any bands, or maybe one band that you toured with, that you got close to or really liked? And then for Tony, I was going to ask if there were any albums that you produced that I guess you were surprised didn't do better, or there are bands that maybe we should be aware of that are not as big as the Bowies and the T-Rexes and the Gentle Giants.
Well, I'll speak first about the bands that. There was one band that was incredibly helpful to us, and still we're still very much friends. Was Jethro Tull. They took us on the road when we were just making a move up the ladder as far as popularity is concerned, and took us on the road to Europe and North America. So and they gave us as much space as we wanted. There was lights as well. I mean, it wasn't like the other band I mentioned. And we also got on famously, personally. They loved our music. We loved their music. And we became friends. And that tour helped us break several markets. And we became headliners of our own, in several markets like Italy and Germany and Canada and even parts of North America from being on the road with Jethro Tull. So that will answer your question. And Tony is badly shoulda, coulda.
There's only one album I regret that didn't do better, and I can't even remember the time period. It was probably in the mid 70s. I discovered this group called Carmen, and three of them were into flamenco music, but they were also rock musicians. And there was a lovely lead singer called Angela, who was the brother of David, who was the lead guitarist and the lead singer. And there was Roberto, who was the other singer. So they could sing in English, and they would sing certain parts of the song in Spanish, too. And it was so exciting, this music. David Bowie fell head over heels with them. And
Fandangos in Space?
Yeah, Fandangos in Space is the name of the album. We made a second one, too, which didn't make it either. But David put them on his show, his 1980 floor show or something like that. He featured them. And we even built, because they did this flamenco dancing with the heels and all that, we built a platform for them and put microphones underneath it. So I really scientifically figured out a way to record flamenco heels without putting the microphones overhead. Because if you put the microphones overhead, which I tried, you could hear them grunting. And but if you just wanted the clicks, the heels, you had to put the microphones under this thing. So I had a studio, a home studio, and I had a big garden, and I had one guy who was a guy called Bruce Lynch, who's a New Zealander, who's my go-to bass player. He worked for Cat Stevens and other people, and he had a friend called Graham who could build anything. So I said, Graham, could you go out in the garden and build me a platform so I could record these guys? A day later, he built this platform. He took the dimensions. It was like 8 by 8. And we found little cavities where I put 2 microphones in it. So when you hear the dancing on that record, it's because Graham built the platform, and it was just a crazy idea, We couldn't, it would be nice if we could afford a theater to do that, but I got that sound there. And then we went to the pub afterwards.
Yes.
Tony, thank you for your creativity. all those years. Derek, a question on the business side. What creative adjustments or creative freedom did you find going, say, from Polygram to Roquefire?
Well, in between, I ran ATCO, of course, and ATCO was that was an incredible experience for me because that was a major corporation under the Warner Electro Atlantic banner, and I was allowed to put my team together, and that was for the most part just an amazing time for me. And at that point, but I still made sure that my hand was in signing bands as opposed to being the guy at the top and allowing my staff to do this. And in fact, I'm really happy that I went down to find Pantera at a club in Texas, and and a club of there was about 50 people there, and I went down because I knew about them, but from somebody else, an attorney, and within 3 songs. I was just following my arms. I just hope they impressed me. Within 3 songs, I was almost in a mosh pit, and I just knew this band had. There's the word it. There's something that you can't describe, but they had. An amazing band. It was Phil and Denny and Dimebag, and I thought I'm going to sign this band, but I don't think they're going to be. I'll just give you an example of what's important to me. They're not going to be on MTV because this is a band that's way hardcore. The music they're playing is so heavy they're never going to get on the radio. However, if they convince me that within a couple of songs that I was going to jump into the mosh pit, then they're going to go on the road, and I'm going to put the money that they had to marketing out there to support them on the road, and that's what I did. So literally within the time I signed them, I said, okay, you guys get out there. I got them together with a new manager, Walter O'Brien, and said, get them out there. And literally they'd play a club of 500 people, and they come back the same place, and 5,000 people would show up. Cowboys from Hell came out, and it just blew into the top of the charts. So that was something that was very important to me. That I kept my hand in, and was involved hands-on, not just having A&R guys or a team, hands-on in seeing these bands like Dream Theater is the same thing at that point in ATCO. And then I went on to Roadrunner, and that was something that's another story. But Roadrunner, there's someone over there who's in Roadrunner in a band that I had to kind of whittle away some stuff that wasn't really right for the label, and make it a label that was a brand, and understanding that you had to build the cake before you had the ice. Anyway, so that was a different experience. But I just wanted to tell you about what I did as an executive. I didn't just sit at this big executive room with lots of guitars in. I was hands-on.
We have time for a couple more questions. Is there any back there?
Yeah, I'm wondering how often you hear music out there in the world that you feel like, boy, that really sounds like they were listening to Gentle Giant at some point. I wonder how often that happens.
Well, it happens quite a lot, actually. And in fact, there's artists that have actually admitted to me that they've been, influenced, which is fantastic. I'm so happy that our music has influenced, especially a younger generation, which is very, very heartening to me. That's something that I didn't expect. Well, I didn't expect for people to even know about Gentle Giant 60+ years, 6 years later. I mean, who knew that I'd be talking about, the band that I was in 1970? But the amazing thing is that there's a whole generation out there that's discovering music and playing the music that we played, and it's very heartening that there's musicians out there who still want to pick up an instrument and want to master it, as opposed to just having a computer and listening to analytics.
Are there any Gentle Giant tribute bands on the road?
There's several actually, but not. Yeah, there are, but there's one in Sweden. That's exactly who they are. Yeah, and they're amazing. They're better, much better than Gentle Giant.
They play your material?
Yeah, they really are. Absolutely,
Wow.
yeah.
That's not easy.
So there are, but there are some bands, but I think it's a little more difficult for bands to. I mean, although what happened, one thing that was amazing, we all went through COVID together, and what was an amazing period of time, or in a bad way, in a good way, was that my son Noah and my kids, he saw that a lot of people out there, a lot of kids out there were playing music and playing along with our music. So my brother Ray put together a video of the fans playing the song Proclamation. And I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's spectacular. It really is, because all these fans were playing along and doing their own thing, playing different parts. And it turned out to be an amazing just piece of film and material, and it was the event of the year, Prog magazine. So that was something that COVID was a good thing for, as opposed to a negative thing for most people.
Have you heard Rachel Flowers?
Of course, she's fantastic.
In the back, these two more, and then I'm afraid we'll have to call it. But yeah, in the blue jacket in the back.
This is a question for both of you. Do you guys still think of yourselves as musicians first, or a producer first, or an executive first? Do you think of yourself as a musician first, in the best possible way?
I'll start, but because it's my book here, and it actually is something that, being an old fart, I can reflect back on my life. And I just mentioned about the time in Gentle Giant and the time before that, and having been comparatively successful on the executive side. And when I look back, there's highs when you have a band like, Bon Jovi, when they did Slippery When Wet. I knew it was going to be that big. I knew it, and I was part of that. I put it together. But there's nothing like the feeling of having a blank page and putting music down and recording it and saying, this is mine. This is something that it comes from there, it comes from there, it comes from there. So those highs are very different. So to answer your question, being a musician is most important for me.
Well, I'm actually a card-carrying musician. I'm in the Musicians Union, American Federation of Musicians. It's Local 802, the New York chapter. I've been a member. Thank you. I've been a member since I got caught on a bar mitzvah I was playing, in this hall that was a unionized hall, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey kid, are you at the union?" And I went, "No." "Well, you got to be in the union if you want to play in this place, this establishment. It's a union establishment." I said, "Well, how do I do that?" He goes, "Here's my card. Come up to the office, and I'll get you signed up." And that was like I was just turning 16, and I've been working as a musician since I was 13. I was playing weddings, like Italian weddings, Jewish weddings, bar mitzvahs, everything. And when you grow up in New York, that is very available to you, which I did. I grew up in New York. And then when I went to London, I joined the London Musicians Union as well, because the British, Great Britain Musicians Union, which meant I could play in Newcastle as well as London. Yeah. So I consider myself a musician first, and through being a musician, and having two home tape recorders, I suddenly taught myself how to become an engineer. And I had an amazing friend called Bruce Turgeson. He's still alive. He built me an EQ from scratch. This guy could throw a few transistors at him and a soldering iron, and there you go. Then you have an EQ system. So I would put my anything through that, my vocal microphone, then my bass, then my guitar, and all that. And I grew up when you grow up in New York, you meet there's so many more opportunities available like this. So I am a musician first, and I'm a producer second, I would say. But because I'm a musician, I think, like George Martin, who was a musician and a record producer, I think you have to be both. You can't say you're a record producer if you're not a musician. I don't buy it. I just don't get it. you're an alta caca. You know what that means? You know, you know, a lot of Jewish people here, right?
It sounds like it.
So I think it's very important that I consider myself a musician, keep up my standards. I play every single day. I play my guitar or my bass or both. And on all my, and then I play all the recorders. I had a beautiful friend when I was in I used to play in the Catskill Mountains 3 summers in a row. So my Yiddish isn't bad. You know, the comedian would get up and tell a joke, and he'd go, "It's a beautiful joke. I'm following it. Then he'd do the punchline in Yiddish. I go to the piano player. I say, "What the hell did he say? What did he say?" And I'm talking about people like Buddy Hackett. Well, he didn't do Yiddish. Buddy Hackett didn't do Yiddish, although he was Jewish. But I went to his house, and I had he adopted. I don't want to get out of the thing, but he adopted 2 Chinese boys, and who lived with him. And they catered they made kosher Chinese food. Cut a long story short. But getting back to the musician thing, you know, I live and breathe music. I've got probably about 20 guitars, about 5 keyboards, and I have around maybe 12 basses. And those are the instruments I play, plus the recorders. Oh, going back to the Catskill Mountains, the guy in my band, we would call Ricardo and the Latineers. Nobody in the band was Latin. The other 3 guys, Artie Butler was one of them. He's a famous film composer now. He was Jewish, and I was the only, you know, non-Jewish person in the band. But I learned so much being up there, playing for people every day. And I'm just so happy I had this versatility in my life and made me who I am today. So I couldn't think of doing anything else. I could probably teach martial arts, but I can, you know.
So that's what I hear.
But then guys like Bruce Lee would be challenging me all the time, you know? And then I would die.
All right. Thanks so much, both. We should. Derek has called for one more, and he's the
Go ahead.
master of the house. So.
Curious to note, it seems like sampling Gentle Giant has been reasonably popular in hip hop. You mentioned one example. I know that Questlove is a big fan of Gentle Giant.
Yes.
I don't think he sampled you guys. Actually, those guys play live.
Yeah.
But you know, what do you think is the appeal of Gentle Giant for the hip hop generation?
It's very interesting, actually, because Questlove, who I've met several times and is a big fan, I was literally around the corner. I was working, you know, I was overseeing a company, and I had to bring Ann Wilson back to play with the Roots to do a special spot. And the engineer who was backstage at the NBC asked me, "Are you the Derek Shulman that was in Gentle Giant?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, hold on a second. And I was waiting there, and Anne was in the corner, and out trotted all the Roots guys. I mean, it was Amir, Questlove, and all the band, and they were looking at me saying, "We are not worthy," to me, you know, and literally asked for my autograph. But that's just a story. But Questlove, Amir Thompson, his name is, he said, "I don't know if you know this." And I don't know if it's because it's a racist thing or whatever, but he said, "You guys have got a ghetto pass."
That's a compliment.
Is that a compliment? I wasn't sure. It was a compliment. Anyway, yeah. In fact, I think that some of the best progressive music out there, and I'll say this, is in hip hop, because they move pieces of music around that you would never understand or think about, but that's what they do. And I think in the last 10, 15 years, that there's some very, very interesting music out there that have used different samples and moved them around to sound like something else. I mean, there's a band called Run the Jewels that had a very big hit with our track Knots. Travis Scott, of course, sampled Proclamation. And in fact, I'll just say this, we won the BMI Songwriters Award 2 or 3 days ago from Songwriter of the Year, which is bizarre because but the fact is that I think the hip hop world has much more openness to interesting music than some of the other producers out there who basically have their music down on a computer, and that's what they do.
Can I just add one more thing to that?
Please do.
Because when I was doing Black Star with David Bowie, it was his last album.
Yeah.
He was inspired by Kendrick Lamar. And he
you
brought To Pimp a Butterfly, he brought it into the studio, and he goes, before we start work today, let's just listen to a track off this album. And he didn't copy anything from Kendrick Lamar. You won't find a trace of Kendrick Lamar on Black Star, but it inspired us to break all the rules like he did.
Yeah.
And that was really wonderful. That was just a great experience to hear that. I mean, I never met the guy, and if I did meet him, I would tell him that. He probably wouldn't be interested, but
I think he would be, actually.
You think so?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll write
of
him a
course.
letter then. Okay.
No, it's just amazing that
But the
it's-
worlds are converging, you know.
Yeah.
The music worlds are converging, which is a good thing. It's a
Yeah.
healthy thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Gentlemen, ready to sign some books?
Why not?